Welcome to Minarets. We're an IT project-based high school, and we do a lot. We use a lot of fair use, and I thought it would be appropriate to introduce the kids to someone who's well adept at the fair use. And we have a lot of questions, and we were hoping that we could bring it to someone who's an expert on these things. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you perfectly well.
Oh, that's great. That's perfect. Okay, so you have, we're going to end up sharing with you our MashUps, but do you have anything, did you check out anything on the school?
Oh, I didn't scope the school. I really want to see the MashUps. I looked at the ones you sent, which were, but I'd love to see what you guys make.
Yeah, the students do much more interesting work than I do, that's for sure. So, a couple of the questions that they had were, what are we allowed to do and what are we not allowed to do? I think that's probably the question on a lot of the students' minds, right?
Sure. Yeah, so the answer is there's no clear answer. The way to think about it is, are you doing something transformative with the material you're trying to use? So if all you're doing is just making the material accessible, like taking a song and making it so people can listen to it in their dorm room or listen to it at a party, that's not transformative. But if you're doing something to it, you're making fun of it, you're using it to make fun of somebody else, you're using it to make a critical point about something, that's going to be the sort of thing that fair use protects. And so if you're doing something like that, there's a lot of people who would like to defend your right to do that against anybody who wants to sue you for doing that. So that's the kind of fight you want to have.
Awesome. So that's why in class I require you guys to write a rationale explaining why you used the works, what works you used, and how it is fair use. Okay, and so some of you have already started that. I actually have both 10th and 11th grade right now, and they're in multiple layers of the whole lesson. So some people are far ahead, some people are just getting introduced today.
Well,
so something that I was curious about that a few students brought up was we were wondering where copyright is heading. Because recently there was that YouTube Viacom court case that was settled, right?
yeah, so copyright is, I think, heading over a cliff. And the question is whether people are going to be smart enough to intervene in a way that saves it so that it does what it needs to do, which is to make sure artists have money when they create great works. It's heading over a cliff because most of the policy people are still obsessed with this control freak conception of what copyright should do, trying to stop people from using anything in any way that they haven't been explicitly authorized to use it. And I think if the law continues to try to do that, it's going to fail, and a whole generation or two generations, basically your generation and the generation that follows, is going to be completely alienated from the law and think it just makes no sense, and eventually when you guys are in good power, we'll just get rid of it. That would be a bad thing, because musicians, filmmakers, some authors really depend upon the democratic character of copyright, and that's why it's important to preserve it and to find a way to make it make sense in the digital age. So if there were that moment of insight, and if policymakers kind of woke up to this problem and tried to do something about it, I do think there's a way to save it. I just don't think in our current political context that's very likely.
Okay. So how would you see schools working into this process?
I think the most important thing for you to do, and this is why the class that you're doing I think is so critical, is that most people think that what kids want to do is steal stuff, and that's what they do with the internet, and so that what we need to do as adults is to try to teach kids how they shouldn't steal. And most people don't recognize that a lot of the stuff obviously there's a lot of stealing going on, so I'm not denying that, but they also don't recognize that a lot of stuff that's going on is that people are actually doing stuff with material, with creative material. They're being creative in the ways that, when I grew up, nobody would ever imagine being creative. Like when I grew up, the most creative thing people did was make a mixtape. Like that was the expression of creativity. And today, many people are remixing songs or making videos that take things and mix them in different ways. And I think that actually demonstrating that to people in power, or your parents, or people who talk to people in power, is extremely valuable, because to the extent people stop thinking that the world is divided into Hollywood types who are obsessive about controlling copyright and pirates who only want to steal stuff and not pay artists, so they start recognizing there's actually another big group of people there who want to create and be able to build and create, and what they create is actually extraordinarily compelling and interesting. Then there's a possibility for making, the political world wake up. I think a great example of this is Greg Gillis and Girl Talk. Gillis comes from Pittsburgh, and he's become something of a local hero in Pittsburgh. His congressman got on the floor of the United States Congress and testified about Greg Gillis's, mashup form of creativity, and started talking about how, maybe we ought to think about whether this kind of creativity should be legal. Now, it was the first time that a U.S. congressperson stood on the floor of the Congress and invoked and defended this kind of remix creativity, but because he becomes so popular in the city and obviously around the world for this particular kind of creativity. Indeed, I just read, somebody just sent me something today. Apparently there's going to be a Greg Gillis Day in Pittsburgh. The city council has voted to give one day of the year to Greg Gillis celebration, Girl Talk celebration, as a testament to how powerful this kind of creativity is. We need more people to think of it as digital technologies as pro-creative, as opposed to thinking of digital technologies as just more efficient ways to steal.
So I've actually, in an English context, I've been talking about how remix and mashup are really metaphors for how we interact with all ideas. What do you think about that?
Totally agree. I mean, once you understand it, it's hard to think about anything in the history of culture as not, in a certain sense, being a mashup or being remix. Right? Remix is how culture has always been made and shared. The difference now is that you can share copies of your particular remix with 10,000 of your best friends across the internet for free. And that wasn't possible before. All you could do is share it with your friends, at dinner or lunch or something. So the technology has enabled a much broader experience of sharing, but it's the same activity. It's exactly how culture has always been made and changed, and we ought to be encouraging and teaching more of it in schools today than happens. I mean, what you're doing is extremely rare. So we don't have many remix classes, but we have plenty of creative writing classes, which are effectively nothing more than doing remix with text. And nobody thinks twice about doing remix with text. It's just when you start using media or music, people get worried.
Professor Lessig, I'm one of the teachers here too, and I have a quick question for you. What would you say to somebody who argues that when you remix or mash up somebody's speech or put different speeches together, that is some form of a